Welcome back to ML Miller Frights, part of the Kings of Horror Network. I'm ML Miller. I'm going to start a new ongoing series of videos focusing on some horror comic books of yesteryear and eventually today. I'm going to call it graphic horrors. With the comic book industry in a state of chaos, I found taking a trip back to simpler times to be the surefire remedy to appease my appetite for graphic goodness. I recently plowed through the first 15 or so issues of the first volume of Werewolf by Night, which was released in 1972 from Marvel Comics. It was during this era that Marvel began a new age of comics focusing on horror that was popular in other media like film and television. As they were beginning to develop characters like X-Men, Avengers, and Spider-Man, Marvel also recognized the rise of horror as a viable genre and sought to take advantage of it. They released quite a few horror titles in the 70s, and I plan on covering some of them in the future. But first, let's hone in on one of my faves, Werewolf by Night. Werewolf by Night was created by Roy Thomas and Stan Lee. They came up with the idea of a werewolf anti-hero, leaving writer Jerry Conway and artist Mike Ploog to flesh out the character itself. The character initially had a 3-issue run in Marvel Spotlight, number 2, 3, and 4, before leaping over into his own 43-issue series after fans responded positively to the stories. Since then, Werewolf by Night has had different incarnations in Giant Size Werewolf, Marvel Comics Presents, and a few of his own miniseries through the years. This video is covering the contents of Werewolf by Night, the Complete Collection, Volume 1, which I'll provide a link to below if you're interested in picking up this awesome collection. Let's talk a little bit about Werewolf by Night's origin. And boy is this an origin in the true Mighty Marvel manner. Werewolf by Night is Jack Russell. That's right, Jack Russell. Writer Jerry Conway states that he must have meant the name to be a joke, as it is a breed of terrier, but he's not for certain. In the origin, Russell is the son of a nobleman warlock named Gregor Russell, who himself is a descendant of Grigory Rusov, the Transylvanian who originally destroyed Dracula and obtained pages of the Darkhold, a dark tome filled with ancient evil. The Darkhold is basically the Marvel Universe's version of the Evil Dead's Necronomicon. When Gregor translated pages of the Darkhold into his diary, he awoke the curse of lycanthropy that has been dormant in his family for generations. What transpires is the stuff of the soapiest of soap operas, as Gregor falls for Laura, his brother's girlfriend, and impregnates her. In order to keep the beast at bay, Gregor would lock himself up in his castle when the moon was full. But one fateful night, a stray lightning bolt released Gregor, and he went on a rampage. Gregor was then murdered by villagers with a silver bullet, forcing Laura to flee Transylvania to Los Angeles, California, and finds Gregor's brother, Philip, who she used to be in love with. The two rekindle their relationship and raise Gregor's children, Jack and Lissa, without knowledge of Gregor's curse. But on Jack's 18th birthday, his mother is in a fatal car crash, and before she dies, she tells Jack about his heritage and the curse. Though Jack holds heavy resentment towards his stepfather, Philip, his mother makes him promise that he will never hurt Philip, even though he is not his father. Jack's transformation seems to be triggered by the death of his mother, as well as the passing of his 18th birthday, as he is destined to turn into a werewolf for 3 nights a month when the moon is at its fullest. Whew, that is one convoluted origin story. In order to find out the entirety of Jack Russell's origin, you can't really start with Werewolf by Night number 1. It really begins with the 3 issues of Marvel Spotlight, which are smartly added at the beginning of this collection I am reading. These 3 issues lay out the soapy operatics that make up Jack's overly complicated origin involving secret love affairs, murder plots, and whatnot. It's also got a big man monster named Craig, who proves to be no match for our furry hero. While it is nice not to have to deal with all of that play out in the first issue of his own series, Werewolf by Night really is a rough first issue, as it simply plops Jack, his uncle Philip, his sister Lissa, and his good buddy and beatnik writer Buck Cohen into the middle of a story that started in Marvel Spotlight. Gregor's castle has been transplanted brick by brick and rebuilt in LA, where Jack and his crew have relocated with pages from the Darkhold. A pair of occultists want the pages for themselves and attack Castle Russell. Of course, this occurs on the first night of Jack's transformation cycle, so they face off against the werewolf, and it ends badly for them. Just to let you know, this werewolf doesn't have any compunction against killing, and is treated as if it were more animal than man, without rational or empathetic thought, at least in the first issues. For a few issues, Jack takes on some villains of the month, all of which seem to have dark designs for Jack's wolfier side. He kind of stumbles into each of them, and it doesn't feel like there's a huge plan going on, rather than just having Jack face off against one foe after another. He fights a madman who attempts to capture the energy Jack releases during his transformations, a historian possessed by the Darkhold, a brazen cowboy who hunts Jack for sport, and an ailing millionaire who seeks to understand Jack's power and use it to heal his own illness. Things really start heating up when Jack is captured by a circus and put on display for the jeering crowds. It's in the circus that he fights a swami with hypnopowers and a short-statured lion tamer inappropriately named Midge. He then stumbles upon a demon he accidentally unleashes from a cage and is accosted by a band of homeless lunatics who live under the streets of LA. These homeless people follow the manipulations of a scarred sound designer with a mind-controlling death whistle. It's all pretty wild and goofy, with fast-moving action, over-the-top combatants to take on the werewolf, and serves as a way to really establish Werewolf's powers, weaknesses, locale, and cast, which will be the foundation for many Werewolf by Night series to come. These first issues establish the wonderful framing device of first night, second night, and third night. We're told this at the beginning of each issue. This easily indicates for the reader where in the transformation cycle Jack is for this particular story. Often, the place in the cycle affects the story greatly, as everything hinges on when and where Jack makes his transformation. Even though these first 10 issues are pretty standalone, they're connected by a few subplots that show there is a bit more going on than a Monster of the Week style comic. Eventually, Lissa finds out about Jack's curse, and she often is abducted and used as bait by those who want to exploit or kill the werewolf. The werewolf begins to show a soft spot for Lissa, though he doesn't seem to completely understand why. We find out Jack is not in control of his werewolf side, but he does seem to occasionally remember what he does as the wolf. There's also an ongoing villain of sorts with the Committee, a diabolical shadow organization bent on capturing and studying Jack and using his power for evil means. This was a simpler time in comics, so the plots aren't the most complex. Still, the twists and turns that Jerry Conway offers up in each issue are 3 times the amount of plot you get in modern comics. The dialogue is clunkier, but also this is a symbol of the ages, with some panels describing the action of what is going on rather than showing it, or going into colorful alliteration to describe a person or scene when no word balloons are really necessary. But if you are an appreciator of 70s era comics, this is going to be delicious stuff to dive into. Issues 11 through 15 bring the collection to an end. This is where Jack Russell moves out of Buck Cohen's apartment, where he's been sort of sleeping on the couch there, and into an apartment of his own. He seems to move into kind of a swingers complex, as Jack quickly befriends 2 gals at the apartment and seems to have a sexual relationship with both of them at once. I guess this was the 70s. In between shaggings, Jack's monstrous side goes toe-to-toe against the demented vigilante Hangman and a sorcerer named Taboo. He also meets Taboo's lovely assistant Topaz, who becomes sort of a sidekick love interest of sorts, who understands how conflicted Jack is with his bestial side. The relationship between Taboo and Topaz is very interesting, as Taboo seems merely a charlatan, while Topaz is the one with all of the power. So we introduce a swords and sorcerer vibe to the story here, and it really expands the world of the Darkhold. Finally, the last issue of the series crossover with Tomb of Dracula, as the werewolf and Topaz battle it out tooth and claw with Dracula, who wants these final pages of the Darkhold that is in Jack's possession. As they move into year 2 of Werewolf by Night, there's much more thought put into the longer-running subplots, the development of reoccurring antagonists like the Committee, and a hard-nosed cop named Lou Hackett, who is suspicious of Jack's proximity to all of these werewolf sightings. While I like the earlier issues, the series really kicks into high gear when Tomb of Dracula writer Marv Wolfman takes over the series with issue 11. And yes, they do point out in the intro that now a real Wolfman is writing the book, now that Marv Wolfman is on board. Wolfman takes the title to a new level of characterization and storytelling. Jack starts to be much more fleshed out as a character with conflict and becomes a part of the larger Marvel universe through guest stars and crossovers with the final installments of this collection. For me, the art is a real draw to this series. Mike Ploog is a legend and proves it here with his simplistic yet emotive panels depicting all kinds of savage action. The werewolf looks pretty much like Lon Chaney Jr.'s take on the character, but is drawn in a much more kinetic way, with him leaping across panels and brandishing his claws. But Ploog doesn't hold back on the violence and horror, making the werewolf tensely muscled and animalistically agile, giving him movement and action we haven't seen in depictions of the werewolf in films. Ploog's figure drawing skills are interesting as they kind of warp the human face and form, which I found to be amazingly appropriate for a horror comic book. Conway and Ploog, and later Wolfman and Ploog, walk the line between superheroes and horror fairly well. In many ways, Marvel is copying its own success as Jack Russell's plight is not unlike Bruce Banner's in The Incredible Hulk. Like Bruce, Jack cannot control the beast within, and struggles to understand his curse while being pursued by forces looking to capture and exploit him. This is a concept that is repeated over and over in comics with outcast superheroes and anti-heroes like Ghost Rider and other heroes, as these on-the-road adventures makes for easily told one-and-done issues. But the inclusion of foes, both psychologically bent madmen and supernaturally or scientifically twisted monsters, and the attention to horrifying detail in Ploog's art, later by Werner Roth, Tom Sutton, and another legend, Gil Kane, give it a much more macabre tone than your normal Marvel superhero comic. Another trait Jack Russell shares with Bruce Banner is that they both seem to shop at the same resilient pants store. Banner has hoarded up all of those trendy purple pants, leaving Russell to pick up the green dungarees from the bargain bins. Mr. Green Jeans also sports a distinguishing head of hair made of wispy red curls, and a body much more muscular than your average 18-year-old. Jack's friends are gleefully ignorant of his wolfiness, completely ignoring the fact that he is always running around shirtless and wearing ripped green pants. I guess they just thought it was a trendy fashion statement. Again, it was the 70s. I guess if Superman can get away with the glasses covering his secret identity for years, shirtless Jack can do the same. As I reread some of these old Werewolf by Night stories, I'm really hit with the unique way Jack Russell's story is told and how it differs from the cinematic way the Wolfman is often depicted in film. Jack is definitely cursed with his lycanthropy, but he seems to benefit from this curse more than his cinematic counterparts do. While the movies seem to try to tell us that giving into one's more animalistic side is not a good thing, as it usually ends in the death of the cursed lead and those he loves, the comics seem to have a more optimistic tone as Jack tries to embrace the fact that man has an animalistic side and even works with that side in order to solve a problem. This distinction between Jack Russell and the cinematic Wolfman also can be made as Jack is often faced with horrors much more twisted than himself. So many of these stories feel more like the team-up movies, like Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. The ongoing nature of the series also allows writers to delve into Jack's character deeper than most cinematic Wolfmen, allowing him victories, defeats, and time in between to understand his plight. I love my werewolf movies, but they are very similar when compared to one another. Werewolf by Night distinguishes itself from those films simply through its ongoing story, allowing time for the character to evolve and develop. I had a blast reading through these old comics. Jack Russell and his wolfy alter ego proved to be fantastic anti-heroes worth rooting for. While the Werewolf by Night comic is a product of its time, with all kinds of fun nods to early 70s culture and trends, the pairing of story and art occasionally clutter the pages, and wordy is a kind way of describing the writing style. Still, there's a charm to reading this series, done by creators Conway, Wolfman, and Ploog, who seem to understand how to pair superheroes with horror effectively. Apparently Marvel is bringing back Werewolf by Night this fall, this time focusing on another person rather than Jack Russell. When that book drops, I think I'll do another video, letting you know how that compares to the classic series. I can't wait to continue the adventures of Jack Russell with the other 2 volumes of Werewolf by Night, the complete collection, with the final issues of Wolfman as the writer, really seemed to be building towards something which I found infinitely better than the Villain of the Week stories of Conway's run. Let me know if you want me to do a video about those future volumes as well. That'll be it for this installment of Graphic Horror on ML Miller Frights. If you dug this video, click the like button below. Share this with your pals across social media. Don't forget to check out ML Miller Writes for written reviews. And please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications to be alerted as to when future videos drop. Until next time, thank you for watching, and take care.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your